We're recording. Hello, BookTube.
Good evening, BookTube.
So
Ross from Standing about the books, and then Tilly from Tilly's Shelf. Doing these Zoom introduction things just doesn't get any easier, does it?
Have you seen Pay Attentions? He did when he did I think it was the tag about tags, my tag. He did a whole thing about how impossible it was, like even saying hello just becomes completely impossible.
It's a massive ordeal.
But we've made it. Hello. And we're here to do our April discussing drama play, Tilly and I.
So for this month, we've read The Almond and the Seahorse by a playwright called Kate O'Reilly, and it was written in 2008.
Yeah. And it's in a collection of plays called Atypical Plays for Atypical Actors, which came out in 2016. And there's like 4 or 5 plays in the collection. Yeah.
And it's a collection that focuses on stories involving disabilities and impairments, and Kate O'Reilly is a playwright who identifies as disabled, and the reason why we're reading this play in April is because of the Disability Readathon, which has been taking place this month. So that Readathon is hosted by Erin at the Geeky Gimp and Anna, whose channel is just called Anna G, so we can put links to their channels in the description. I think their things that they're doing for the Readathon have mostly been on Twitter and on Instagram, if I'm right. Those aren't areas that I'm on a lot, but I can see that there's quite a bit about it on Twitter. There's also been quite a few videos on BookTube, but by other content creators. So this is just our little bit, because one of their prompts was read a play by a disabled playwright, and it was just impossible to pass that up with our knowing that we were going to be reading a play this month.
Yes, so obviously we had to do it. And it's a really good prompt, in that when I then went to look for plays, by disabled playwrights, it was relatively difficult to find them. And I was quite keen that we did a UK playwright this time, because we've done a couple of Americans, and, which has been really interesting. But I thought, let's bring it back home. And it was not straightforward. Mm-hmm. And I quite wanted one to find someone who it doesn't have like a hidden disability they don't talk about, someone who's actively says, I'm a disabled playwright, and she's like she's a disability drama activist, quite political about it. Yeah.
And she has campaigned about better access to transport and public buildings. She has also talked a lot about how ability and disability is presented in the media, including talking about able-bodied actors taking on disabled character roles, and the issues the issues that there are with that. So it just seemed very, very much like she was an appropriate playwright to choose for a readathon that's trying to bring more attention to that.
Yeah. And so we picked one of the plays in the collection, because we didn't know a lot about sort of Kate O'Reilly before, and neither of us had ever seen any of these plays performed, and so on. We just had to pick one, and we picked The Almond and Seahorse. Do you want to explain why?
So you found the collection eventually, and you told me a little bit about several of the plays, and I was immediately drawn to The Almond and the Seahorse because it looks at 5 people, I suppose, with experiences of head injury and memory loss, so traumatic brain injury, called TBI, if I say that at certain points in this video, stands for traumatic brain injury. So 2 people who have had memory loss from head injuries, and their partners, and then a doctor is involved in their care. And I was very interested in that idea because I've got a lot of professional experience of working with people with head injuries, of various degrees of severity, but mostly more severe head injuries. And I just wanted to see a play exploring that theme, I suppose, and see a different perspective on it.
Yeah. So that's why we picked this one. In retrospect, we think it's possible that it wasn't the best one to choose, but we'll talk about that more kind of as we go through. Yeah.
So I think we wanted to start by talking about things that we liked about the play and what we appreciated about the Almond and the Seahorse and the characters in it.
Yeah. The thing, one thing that I particularly liked about the play as a whole was the instructions that she gives about how it's to be staged.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's got the 5 characters, and it sort of basically says that they should all kind of be on stage kind of like all the time, but then they're sort of, you can imagine that with lighting and so on, you should focus in on them, and they come together as different pairs all the way through. So in different scenes, you'll focus in on 2 or 3 out of the 5, usually only as pairs, which, so it's quite intimate, and but also very, you know, it conjures up the different scenes, like in people's home and in a garden and in this kind of respite center and in like the doctor's office, and, you know, in different places, but it all just in very sort of, it's very minimalist, I suppose, is how he suggests that you stage it.
All you would need to put on this play is a space with 2 chairs and a door, I think. So it's a very,
pretty much,
it would be very easy to approach from a staging point of view, and then obviously you could add to that with what you chose.
So it's all very much focused on the characters and the dialogue. That's it, and it's a low plot, high dialogue play.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Is that fair?
Yeah, and we talk about it being about the characters, and one of the things that I liked about the characters, and there's the prologue to the play kind of talks about how one of the things that she was hoping to do is kind of question the narrative of who are the victims in head injury, and the narrative of the brave and resilient victim, and talking instead about survivors. One of the things that I liked was the presentation of the 2 characters who have got memory loss as being human beings who could make their own decisions and have the capacity to make those decisions, but exploring the fact that those might not be the same decisions that they would have made before they had their head injury. So for instance, Gwyneth, who is an older woman who's had a head injury. Gwennon, sorry.
Dealing with GW, I know.
Sorry. Had her head injury 20 years ago, and she doesn't, in certain scenes in the play, she doesn't want to see her husband, and her husband really, really struggles with that. And it is emotional, but I liked the fact that it kind of showed that it is her right to make the decision that she doesn't want to see this person that she doesn't really have that emotional connection to anymore.
Or is it's like
and other scenes where they showed us as kind of making different and new decisions.
So she's very positively trying to show to not focus on victimhood, or in fact, and perhaps we'll come back to this theme, almost she sort of does see that perhaps the partners of the people who've had this traumatic brain injury are more the victims. I mean, victim is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, that they're the ones that have the struggles. And
there is a lot of suffering in that role of being a carer that is not frequently under acknowledged. I think she really shows the frustrations very well of being with somebody who doesn't have both of the characters who have memory loss have quite specific short-term memory loss, covering sort of the years following their accidents. They're not able to lay down new memories from the time of their head injury. She really shows the frustrations of kind of dealing with somebody who doesn't have that memory capacity, for instance, not remembering that they've eaten, or not remembering to take a tablet. And from the carer side of things, she really does illustrate, you know, how you have to really find ways to cope with that.
And find ways not to become like angry or resentful, or you know, not to, like, she does show particularly, well, she shows Sarah, whose husband Joe had a tumor.
He had a tumor, a brain tumor.
So she shows her having to sort of stop herself becoming angry and irritated, and he becomes irritated with her for sort of like reminding him to do things. But we,
as the audience, you can see that
he has forgotten.
Yeah, he needs the reminders.
Yeah. But he hates being reminded, understandably, as one would. So that's that. So all that I did find it quite an emotional play to read. I was quite moved at times. Yeah.
Just thinking about Sarah and Joe's relationship for a little bit longer, I think also they showed quite well the way that Sarah's behavior towards Joe changed over time as his memory loss got worse. As the play goes on, we see her starting to I suppose struggle more with the carer role, and struggle to continue to see Joe as the person he is, or struggling to adapt to the person that he is now. And he kind of says, like, I hate it when you talk to me in that condescending tone, and as the audience
your school mistressy voice.
You
can just hear it, can't you?
And as the audience, you can kind of see how she's got to this point where she's being like, wow, it's really great that you said that complicated word or something, but it's really not she's not. I don't know how to put it, but from Joe's point of view, it's not the way that he wants to be treated.
Yeah, and she misses things about the old Joe that of course he doesn't miss. So she misses. She says, like, new Joe is, like a really nice person and quite funny, and like she likes him. But she misses the dark, naughty, sort of wicked sense of humor, sort of version of Joe she knew before. Which and a play about, I suppose one of the underlying themes of the play is about personality and who we are, and what makes us, what makes Joe Joe, because he was Joe and he's still Joe, but he's a different Joe.
I think one of the other things it's talking about is who we are versus who we plan to be, and both of the couples at the time when they were affected by head injury were young couples who were planning families. One of them, Gwennon, was pregnant. Sarah and Joe were planning to have a family and actively wanting to have a family, and the impact that their head injuries had in terms of them not being able to have that planned family, and the way that it kind of interrupted
and Joe still kind of wants to, and Sarah like almost contemplates it, and then you can tell she's thinking, how would I manage, and how would our child manage, so we're both, I know, conscious all the time in talking about this in this video, just trying to be really careful about the language that we use. And this was a challenge for the playwright, I think, and we'll come back to the own voice question in relation to this. But it's like, you're constantly skirting around or trying to avoid sort of saying the wrong thing. And I think why drama is really, really important around sort of, having drama around things like disability is because it's like about getting the words out there and saying things, and it's really it's like that's a really important function of drama, isn't it, to help us explore things,
have those discussions.
But at the same time, I'm constantly thinking, would I upset or offend someone by saying the wrong thing, so it's just sort of, so you need disabled playwrights to like forge ahead and do it, don't you?
and help lead,
and
help lead that discussion, help raise that discussion, I suppose, as well as creating enjoyable and interesting works of drama that don't always have to be political, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, carry on with what you were going to say.
But so what I was going to go on to say, though, was that one of our sort of perhaps our hesitations or worries about the play is that she's a disabled playwright. She's done other bits of drama that are very much linked to her experience, or she's working with disabled actors. She does ensemble work where the actors involved bring their experience, and that changes that particular version of the play or helps write it, all of those things. But with a traumatic brain injury, it would be very difficult to have. She hasn't had a traumatic brain injury, as far as we know, and the people acting it, you suspect, couldn't have. Or how would you manage to?
Yeah, so
I don't know. There's a whole set of issues there that I just think we need to talk about.
You said we don't need to talk about, or we do need to talk about. We do need to talk about. Yeah, well, I think it was relevant in terms of talking about her frustrations at the idea of cripping up and having able-bodied actors playing disabled characters. That to memorize all of the lines in this play, Jo couldn't be played by somebody who had the extent of memory loss that Jo has in the play. He definitely could be played by an actor who had an extent of memory loss. But it would have to be appropriate to that actor. I mean, it could be done in a different, we were talking about television and film being maybe more easily adapted to people suffering's the wrong word, sorry. This is what we're talking about. It's people experiencing memory loss. Because you can change the way that you film it to give people more chance to welcome up, to be prompted with lines and so on. In fact,
I guess you could do that on stage, couldn't you? Because you could have like the equivalent of a teleprompt. But
I guess so, yeah.
But you if you're doing it like that, you'd have to then create the emotion in the moment as you read it. You wouldn't. It'd be very, very challenging, wouldn't it?
It would say, it might be easier to do something that was more improvised.
Which is something that she has done.
Some of the other the models have been involved.
So you told me a really interesting thing, which I'd somehow missed, which is about a really well-known actress in a really well-known drama series who had a
subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is a very specific form of stroke. So Emilia Clarke in Game of Thrones.
So it happened after season 1, and she had to come back and film season 2 while still very much
actively recovering and undergoing rehab therapies. And I'm really surprised that you hadn't heard of it, because she has been, as we were saying earlier, she has been very outspoken and open about it, and done a lot of subsequently done quite a lot of charitable fundraising and awareness raising, and written about it in numerous places.
Of the Stroke Association. And now you've reminded me, I've heard her name in association with that, but I hadn't kind of twigged Daenerys in Game of Thrones. I just hadn't made that
connection. And because she's a very young stroke survivor, and the thing is with subarachnoid hemorrhages, they happen to young people, and that's one of the things about head injury, is it often is something that affects younger people as an event for various reasons. So she's not the image that you might have of somebody who would have a stroke.
So yes, you could have an actor performing this, but it would add another layer of challenges. But what I think we do know is that that TBI is not so Kate O'Reilly is a disabled playwright, but she doesn't have a brain injury. So she's writing about now. Normally, when she writes about other brings experience of other sort of disabilities or differences to her plays, she's very much doing that using interviews or recordings or or the actual actors who were performing it to bring that to the drama. Whereas this, she had to research it and write it. So it's slightly different.
I think it is well researched, and we were speculating, obviously, earlier, obviously with no real basis other than it says in the prologue that she has personal experience related to memory loss. So we were speculating whether she had some caring experience of memory loss experience as a carer, because the carer sides of things do tend to come across a little bit better in this play. Can't remember where I started that sentence.
Yeah, and that I wanted to pick up on, because as I was reading it, I hadn't picked up on the oh, hang on, I've just got to plug. I hadn't realised the thing had come unplugged. It's telling me my battery's running low. Okay, I've plugged it back in.
Back to business.
Yeah, no. So as I was reading the play, I was really responding to the two carers. Carers, partners who have a caring role now to their partner, and because that's my area of work, working with carers is a big chunk of what I do. I was thinking that was me naturally kind of like homing in on the thing that I understand best or is closest to my previous experience, and so on. And but actually, having read in the introduction, she says she has personal experience, and I think she's saying as the relative perhaps of someone with a brain injury rather than having one herself, because that's then I'm thinking that actually it wasn't just me projecting that onto the play. It really is a play that is perhaps has that bias, whereas her other plays are much more about being disabled, I suppose.
I guess related to that and the idea of sort of own voices and so on, obviously we've said I don't have any personal experience with memory loss, thankfully in that context. You have as a carer for your mom to a certain extent. I have professional experience of this, but even within the professional experience that I've had, I did sometimes find the presentation of TBI to be perhaps more limited. In the play. And I think she did really work hard to research it, but I think I just often when I was reading it, I enjoyed the partners, and I did enjoy the characters, but I felt like for a play that is written to explore this idea of TBI and memory loss, it didn't quite grasp, I guess, some of the complexity and the different forms of memory loss and the different forms of personality change that can result from head injury. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like the kind of the classic one that people think of like you have an accident or a tumor or whatever, and you only remember the things that happened before that, and whereas it's not usually quite as clear.
It's normally not that simple. Not that that's in any way a simple thing to live with, and it does definitely happen, but most often memory loss is more patchy and more complicated, because it's a very complicated thing that is done in the brain. Anyway, my cat's come to join me and she's soaking wet because it's raining outside.
Nice for you.
Wet hands I have now.
Wet cat fur, lovely. One of the things that I really liked about the character Gwennon in the play, who is one of the is the character who was in a car accident 20 years ago, and sort of is kind of I was going to say stuck, but again that's negative language, isn't it? But she still thinks of herself as her 20-year-old self or 25-year-old self, and has the shock every day of realizing that she looks in the mirror and this isn't her 25-year-old self. But one of the things, and this is a good playwright, isn't it? One of the things that she does is she lapses in two things. She lapses into Welsh sometimes because she's bilingual, and that just sort of which is lovely. And that added a certain, and apparently in productions of the play that have been done in other places, rather than lapsing into Welsh, they might, use a
different language,
language as
an appropriate local language.
Yeah, but the other thing that she does is she talks about stories that she sort of knew as a child, or songs or poems or different things, and there's this. My favourite bit, I think, in the whole play is when she's talking about like an old, I think, Welsh folk tale, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it because I really love this. So and I won't attempt a Welsh accent because that would just be farcical. But so she says, there was once a girl, a curious, adventurous, disobedient girl. She wandered where she was told not to, befriending the folk who took her down underground. So it's that idea of being taken off with the fairies.
Classic fairy tale, old English fairy tale.
You get taken underground.
Not even old English fairy tale, but a typical fairy tale thing, isn't it?
And then you live this indefinite period
alternative life
in the world of those fairies. And it says they washed her hair, although it wasn't dirty, gave her food, which she took, although she wasn't hungry, and they led her in such dances, a little bit in Welsh, and she was happy, and she lived with them, even fell in love with them, and it was so restful, full of ease. Another little bit in Welsh, so I won't attempt. And then one day word came that the people from above ground wanted her back. They said they loved her and wanted her home. She'd been stolen. Her parents were dying, her beloved pining. They were suffering without her presence. She didn't want to go. They wouldn't accept that she'd chosen, and so they attacked, smashing through the walls, leaving a pile of rubble as chambers collapsed. They were fearless and exacting in their executions, but gentle with her, asking her why she would want to live in the gloom, in the whispered half silence. We have saved her, they told each other, liberated her from being buried alive. And I'll stop there, but that really sort of worked for me.
And it's a beautiful metaphor for the story of that character, because she is happy in herself, or she seems to be happy and fairly content in herself, and the thing that distresses her is the distress that she sees from her husband, that she doesn't remember as her husband. So the distress that she sees from this man who keeps paying attention to her when she doesn't want him to.
She says, she says, he's very kind, but he wants me to love him, like, don't.
And it's almost like you want the couples to be okay, and you want the couples to succeed, because that's kind of, in a way, what we're conditioned to want and expect. You want marriages to work out, but in a way, she's almost saying that there needs to be an acceptance of the new personality, the new character, and she kind of presents a hopeful note for that at the end.
Yes,
I suppose.
Yes, she does, and which brings us to hope in the play and the figure of the Doctor.
Yes. Can I just say, we said we were going to be very brief, and I think we've been not so brief, so we should wrap up after this point about the Doctor.
Okay, well, so I'm thinking about the social and medical models of disability and so on, and how there's a whole, a huge issue with, like, there's useful health-based interventions for aspects of impairment, but there's also a whole medical model of, like, we're going to make your wanting, and we're going to make you better, or and or not, or we'll try and manipulate you to be more normal, and and the Doctor figure kind of stands in for that, I guess, in the play, which is why she needs to be there. But she one of the other carers, Sarah, kind of accuses her basically of giving her false hope. She's doing all these interventions, and Joe is getting worse. And
worse from Sarah's perspective.
Yes, although not necessarily from Joe's. Yeah. But so that I found as an interesting addition, because I did think, why is she having a Doctor character when she's wanting to sort of show that people as survivors, not victims, as it were. And then I kind of understood that it was about, that was sort of very good. So a qualified, I tell our feelings about the play were of qualified enthusiasm. There were things about it that were lovely, that's lovely language, lovely, good, strong emotions. It's well constructed.
It was definitely a thought-provoking play, and it's one that I would like to see it. Like, I know we've talked about it pretty much exclusively in terms of us in the way of talking about, you know, a play about looking at disability or exploring disability, but I think it would be enjoyable and emotional to watch with it, leaving other aspects aside, if that makes sense.
But I wish that we'd actually read another of Kate O'Reilly's plays that is much more from a sort of more of an own voice experience. Like I also read In Water I'm Weightless, which is a sort of like, she's built from a selection of monologues from recordings with people, and that was much more political, I suppose, and more it satisfied what I was looking for in terms of what we picked, why we were picking this play this month, as opposed to, you know, dramatic qualities, as it were. So I would say, you know, if you're going to read a Kate O'Reilly play, maybe read
maybe don't read the Almond and the Seahorse,
maybe if you want to get that kind of but as ever, our discussing drama plays are always fascinating and thought-provoking, and I'm really glad we went there.
Read it. And I'm glad that we talked about it as much as we have.
And I will look out for because obviously Kate O'Reilly's, you know, an active playwright working now in the UK, so I'm going to look out for one of her plays, you know.
And you know, one of her productions, because she's you know, things by her are coming out and being performed, so it would be fantastic to see something new by her at some point.
Absolutely. I was really, she's done one that's about Frida Kahlo, and that we have a bit of a family joke about, like, you endlessly, it's another effing Frida Kahlo thing, you know, everywhere you go you see, but she's so it made me laugh when I saw she'd done one called The Nine Fridas.
Just tangent completely, but have you seen the Disney Pixar film Coco?
Oh right, yes, you've got to watch it.
Frida Kahlo's climbing out of Frida.
Yes.
If it's a running joke, then there's a lot of Frida Kahlo.
It's not. Yes. Well, there we go. Let's stop. That was April. Not sure yet what we're going to do in May, but I know it will be wonderful. And have a good month, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.